a very spiritual practice. As I said, that was my parents' beliefs / practices, not mine. But I had the fear of God struck into me about these things from a young age. Anyway, when I went to college, I met my best friend Meg. She was also best friends with these two girls, Becca and Kayla. She'd lived with them the past year, or the year prior, but they all were placed in separate dorms when I became friends with her. They were still typically present when I was with my best friend, though. I remember both Becca and Kayla I always felt very off about, especially Kayla. She was kind of a looming presence and had a really dark feeling about her. Both of them were pretty negative, but Kayla specifically had been through some horrible experiences. In brackets, she was diagnosed with a severe complex PTSD, and she had never been to counseling, etc. A lot of generational trauma with both of her parents and upbringing. One day, Meg and I were in her dorm room talking about religion and spirituality. Mainly that neither of us are especially religious, but so believe in higher powers and spiritual practices slash rituals of our own. I was also talking about some of my weird vibes around Kayla. She listened and got really quiet until I asked if she felt similarly. Meg validated the feelings and told me that Kayla had an antique doll she'd acquired from her parents' attic and took it with her everywhere. Meg also told me that there was a spirit attached to the doll, who she called the doll man. Ew. Meg told me that when she lived with Becca and Kayla, she frequently used a Ouija board to talk to him, and that she had experienced some extremely alarming things in the apartment they all shared. She said she had woken up repeatedly, brackets daytime naps and nighttime sleep, to see an enormous billowing figure in the corner of her room, and when she talked to the other girls about it, that's when Kayla told her about the doll. Meg also shared that she had been in the room, just not observing, but just around, and watched the planchette from the board fly off at her as she entered the room while the girls were mid-question, and that Kayla had told her the doll man did not like having other people around that much. Meg told me that the school year was coming up to a close, and move-out time was coming. The doll man appeared to manifest closer to her bed until one night she woke up, and he was basically standing on top of her. She said she didn't ever encounter that again after she moved from that apartment. Next year, a mutual acquaintance of ours, Jess, moved into the same dorm apartment Meg, Kayla, and Becca had been in living in prior. I knew Jess because we met on campus and connected on being brought up Catholic. She remained practicing but open-minded that I was no longer practicing. One day, Meg and I encountered her in the university housing office, and she looked exhausted. I asked if she was okay, and she burst into tears. We ended up getting coffee together, and she told us that she was expecting horrible harassment in the apartment. She said cabinet doors were flying open / slamming. Her front door was opening and slamming. She literally called the police because she thought that she was getting broken into, and they showed up and laughed at her. And when she would try to sleep, she would be awakened by cold hands smacking her face. She had her sister staying the night because she had begun seeing these massive billowing figure looming at the foot of her bed. She said her sister had seen it too. One night she was showering and the cabinets in the bathroom began slamming around and the shower curtain was ripped back, and she heard feet racing up and down the hallway and outside the door. She had been in the housing office trying to get resigned also, like, why do I believe it? Just like near the end there, I was like, okay, things are like flying off the walls. The doll man. I want to hear more about that, I feel. Okay, let's read another. Guys, why am I cold? I just got like a cold chill. I got goosebumps. Can you see that? I've got goosebumps. Oh, wait, maybe I am scared. Okay, my grandma used to tell me scary stories when I was little. There's one I'll never forget. I was 10 years old when Grandma came to live with us. It was about 6 months after Granddad passed, and I guess, looking back, she must have been lonely in that big house of theirs, rattling around with only the grief and memories for company. So despite a few protests from my mom, my parents took her in. There were no protests from me, none at all. Grandma was loud and fun, and I loved her. She had an almost limitless supply of boiled sweets. What is that? Boiled sweets. And she'd always slip me a couple whenever she saw me. She was always the first to stick up for me when I got in trouble too. But it was her stories I loved the best. Grandma had all kinds of scary stories. Stories about growing up during World War II, and stories about things that she'd get up to with her friends on the South Coast. After her family had been evacuated, sad stories, funny stories, and adventure stories. But it was her scary stories that were my favorite. Grandma had lots of scary stories. She told me she dabbled in the occult when she was a teenager, trying out Ouija boards with her friends, tarot cards, fortune telling, and all that stuff. Most of the stories I'd laugh off or forget about not long after she was done telling them. But there were a couple that really did spook me a little bit. I was only 10 at the time, you have to understand. My grandma certainly knew how to bring the stories to life. She'd shut off the lights in the room, so only the glow of the night sky shone through the curtains. Why am I getting freaked out? I'm all like, in my room, like, I feel exposed. And she'd shuffle in real close enough so I could see the wrinkles on her face and smell the boiled sweets on her breath. Close enough so her deep blue eyes could stare straight into mine. She must have given me nightmares with a few of those tales, but now, years later, there's only one that I can still remember. Only one that stuck with me. The story about the shower and Mr. Longfingers. as you remember the rules, you'll be fine. What rules? Well, when you're in the shower, you try not to close your eyes for too long. 5 seconds is fine. 10 is just about okay, but any longer than that. Yeah, then what? Well, any longer than that, you may just start feeling something in the room with you. Something's watching. And if you ever go longer than 15 seconds, that's when you might start to hear a noise too. Hear what? A soft tap, tap, tap house wasn't entirely silent. Floating down the hall, muffled by a closed door, I heard the sound of rushing water, the noise of the shower. I leapt out of bed and ran down the upstairs hallway, my heart already pounding in my chest. As soon as I reached the closed bathroom door, I started banging on it. A deep terror was welling up inside me like cold water from a well. Something I couldn't place, and I kept banging and shouting "Grandma" over and over again, even though she didn't respond. Off to my right, I was dimly aware of the voices of my parents' room, the sleepy shuffle of footsteps, but before they had a chance to make it out onto the landing, I'd lift my hand to test the door handle, more out of instinct than because I thought it might actually open, but the door wasn't locked. I kept banging with my free hand, and it swung suddenly inwards, bringing me face to face with a wall of steam. Heat struck my skin. I squinted my eyes against the damp fog and peered into the bathroom. And before Dad pushed me to one side, before everything around me descending into shouting and tears and chaos, I saw her. I saw Grandma. She was lying naked on the floor in the shower cubicle, the water beating down around her, blue eyes bulging from her face. One hand was curled against her chest like a dead bird, while the other trailed against the glass of the shower cubicle. The flailing finger mark she carved through the steam was still fresh and clear. It was a heart attack that killed her. Sure. That's what my dad had told me. He said Grandma was old, and the thing had struck her quickly and suddenly. She would have died fast and without pain, Dad said. She wouldn't have suffered. I knew better, though. Even as a 10-year-old kid, I knew better. And years later, writing this as an adult, I still know better. I also know my wife and kids resent me for refusing to have a shower in the house, for insisting everyone takes baths. They pretend it's okay and they humor me, but I can tell they don't really understand it, not at all. My wife thinks she does. She thinks I still carry the trauma of seeing my grandmother dying in front of me when I was little. I guess she's right in a way, but she doesn't fully know the truth. Nobody does. No one would believe me even if I told them. Because no one would believe me if I said the reason I don't take showers, the reason I haven't had one since I was 10 years old, isn't because I was scared of the sight of the dead body. It's because all of those years ago, when I crept back into the still hot bathroom after the paramedics had taken Grandma's body downstairs, I made sure to check the marks her fingers had carved through the steam glass of the shower cubicle. And those marks weren't just on the inside. Ooh, that was a really good ending. Oh, I really liked that one. It almost was like written like a story. Like, I don't know if it's like fully true, but I hope it is, because, well, I guess not. The grandmother, but that was good. It was spooky, and I liked the ending. The marks weren't just on the inside. Okay, since this video is getting kind of long, I wasn't expecting that one to be so long. I thought now would be a good time to read the subscriber story. Okay, so it doesn't say if they want to be anonymous, so I guess I will say their name. Hey, I'm Miriam. A strange but not so big incident happened with my boyfriend, and I witnessed it on call. Also, thank you for being a safe space and take love. Thank you for sending this story. I hope you see this video. So, it happened in October 2024, a few days ago. I'm 20 and my boyfriend is 22. He lives with his parents. A few days ago, I was on call with him that night. What's on call? Like, a few days ago, I was on call with him at night. It was around 3 a.m. We were talking and suddenly his doorbell rang. I also heard the sound because his room was close to the front door of his house. I thought I heard it wrong, but then he surprisingly said, "Who could be there at this No one answered. They asked multiple times. Still, no one answered. My boyfriend peeped through the looking glass. Even though it was dark, he could see no one was there. They lived on the 3rd floor, and they owned the building. He and his parents went to the balcony to see if someone was there in the front of the building for any emergency. And it was a really scary thing to witness for them. But they saw a Katya, I don't know. A Katya, I hope I'm saying that right, is a thing they used to carry the dead bodies, usually of Muslim people, to their grave. It has 4 corners. They carry it on their shoulder. They saw the Katya and only the Katya. Oh my god. Not a single person was there. No dead person. No one. His parents immediately went back to their room without saying anything. He also came back to his room and told me what happened. I was surprised mostly. It wasn't making any sense at all. No one died in their building because there was no sound of crying. There was no sounds, noises at all. It was a one clear bell on the door. No one was even at the door. And anyone from outside the building can't enter the building because the gate was locked. So there's just like that thing right in front of their door. And they just rang the doorbell and walked away. Or he was scared, but I still asked him to check if that Katya was still there under their building. He slowly went to the balcony with his phone and saw that it wasn't there. It was gone. He went back to his room and I told him not to worry, not to be scared. It was a strange night. We went to bed at 5 a.m. that night. In the morning, he found out that the doorbell rang only on their apartment. No one in the entire building heard any doorbell ringing. No one in the building died. No one came to their apartment for anything at that time. No one from the outside entered the building because the gate was in fact locked. I believe my boyfriend and all the things he said because I heard the doorbell ringing as well. It was so clear. Nothing bad happened after that, but it was indeed a strange night. Who was at the door at 3 in the morning? Who rang the bell? And what the Katya was for? And what was the Katya for? Who brought the Katya and who took it? So many questions. Unfortunately, there was no CCTV camera. But after this incident, they decided to place CC cameras. I'm glad to share this with you. Thank you, Miriam from Bangladesh. Well, thank you so much, Miriam, for this really spooky story. That is so wild. Like, I have so many questions. If I saw that outside my door, I would surely be freaked for sure. Wow. That was like extra spooky because like that's like someone's like actual story. Like, you know, you can never like know on Reddit if they're like made up or not. But I really appreciate you sending this story to me. And if any of you have any spooky stories you'd like to send me, please do. I would love to read them, and I one day might share some of my own slash some stories that my grandma, who has passed away when I was younger, she used to tell me really scary stories, and I like to repeat them, and I've told multiple friends like growing up her spooky stories. So maybe if you guys send me some, I will share some of mine as well. I'd like to thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun